The hospital's tension is at an all-time high, fans are upset, and social media is in chaos. What went wrong? Is there a more serious issue going on, or was this merely an unexpected health scare? As the adored reality TV actress, Yandy Smith battles for her life in the intensive care unit, the entertainment industry is in utter astonishment. Many doctors observe Harris by her side in anguish, and doctors are utterly baffled. Rumors of a startling discovery within the hospital corridors could alter everything as medical professionals work to stabilize Yandy's condition. Will Vandy survive as we come to terms with this terrible and surprising turn of events? The family's sources divulge horrifying information and secrets that were never intended for the general public to know. Men who are broken and defenseless need answers in the middle of everything. You'll be astounded by what we found, so keep watching. The hospital bed where Yandy Smith lay immobile, her complexion pale, her lips dry, her body unnaturally still, was surrounded by the humming IV drips, the steady beeping of the heart monitor, and the low murmur of nurses and physicians filling the chilly, sterile air of the intensive care unit. Harris from MC remained motionless in the doorway, gasping for air. He hesitantly moved forward, his hands trembling at his sides, certain that this was not possible. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he realized that Yandy, the strong, relentless force that had held their family together, was now battling for her life. She had an oxygen mask fastened to her face, was covered in wires, and her chest hardly rose and fell under the sheets of Chris White Hospital. She was not the same woman he had bid farewell to hours earlier. The dead doctor, a man in his late 50s with a tight face and tired eyes, let out a short exhale. "Tell me what's wrong with her, doctor." Mindy explains, "You don't know this, but we're still doing tests right now, and her vitals are unstable, and we don't know what's causing it." His fist squeezed, his wrist cracked. "You are a doctor, and you should be aware that my wife is dying and dying. You tell me that something is attacking her body, even though you have ruled out a heart attack and a stroke. The lab findings are still pending." His head is whirling, Mindy notices. "How did this occur?" Yandy was fine just this morning, taking business calls as normal and joking and talking about the kids. How could things have gone so bad so fast? He returned his attention to Yandy, his children's mother, the lady who had been his. He reached back for her hand and gave it a light squeeze. But the sensation was too cold, and the lump in his throat got worse. When his wife failed to wake up, the door behind him sprung wide, and Julie Harris, his mother, hurried in. Her hands were in line with her mouth as she gasped when she saw Yandy in that hospital bed. "No, Jesus, no, 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 no." She just fell out of his grasp as his face twisted in agony. No one knows what's wrong, but Rose was trembling with emotion. Julie's eyes were wild with dread, and she seized his hands. How does one get into the intensive care unit after healing LAPSA? The doctor's jaw clenched so painfully that he shook his head. "Although I don't know, Ma, I am aware that his voice breaks if something were to happen to her. We're doing everything we can, but for the time being, we need to keep her stable," the doctor said, clearing his throat. "She is ostentatious. She is responding slowly, and the VDLS are low." With a terrified expression on her face, Julie shook her head and said, "No, this isn't happening, this isn't happening." A loud warning from one of the machines alerted him to the fact that he was no longer paying attention. What was that? Nurses rushed to the bed to check the IVs as the doctor's face darkened. He lunged at IVs. But he was stopped by a nurse who said, "You must leave, sir. I won't abandon her." Another alarm sounded as his roar echoed through the room. The doctor was in respiratory trouble, and her face tensed. She was collapsing, and her breathing was erratic. Her blood had frozen, and Mindy saw it. The staff hurried to put her on a ventilator after the doctor's harsh observation. A nurse grabbed MD's shoulders and forced him from the room before he could respond. There was silence as the door banged shut. Judy gripped DC's arm as he stood motionless, his heart thumping and his breath breathless. What if she fails to show up? He was unable to respond since, for the first time in his life, he was begging God to keep her away from him as he stood outside the intensive care unit, his hands clutched together like a man in dire need of a miracle. He said to himself, "Please don't take her away from me." He could hear the monitors buzzing softly through the glass, and he could see Yandy Smith lying still behind those sterile white doors, her body attached to more equipment than he could count. In a waiting room, Julie Harris Meglas sat with her hands clasped and her lips moving in silent prayer. Doctors were rushing in and out, their faces smeared with desperation, and their hushed chats sent shivers down his spine every second. But even the family's strong, unyielding matriarch looked broken and appeared to be still alive. It seemed to go on forever. Ju gently reached for Menny's arm and murmured, "You need to sit down." But Menny shook his head and tightened his jaw. Only a handful clenched. Andy was all right, chatting about their future, joking, and making plans. Nobody had any damn answers, and she was now battling for her life. The ICU doors then abruptly sprang open, and the doctor, Whittaker, came out. Lara Mindy hurried forward and took the doctor's arm as his heart nearly stopped. "Please tell me something. Will she be all right?" According to the doctor, she is stable but in critical condition. Doctor. Critical. Whittaker. Back of Mindy's neck, displaying fatigue. "We still don't know what caused this, but it shows that she is alive but not breathing on her own. The ventilator is keeping her stable. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me as I staggered back." Heaved with fury bubbling beneath his pain, please have mercy on his chest. You don't know why the doctor hesitated, but he suddenly collapsed. "Based on our testing, we believe it may be hazardous exposure." His thoughts abruptly stop, and Mindy jolts to consciousness. "Are you referring to poison?" Dr. Whittaker gave a solemn nod. Her symptoms, which include abrupt respiratory failure and a precipitous decline in oxygen levels, are concerning. "We need to know what happened to her blood if she was given anything." The blood of numerous persons was present. Many people didn't like Andy and wanted to see her leave. Did someone set emergency protocols in motion and do those dreadful tests, or was this just a weird medical emergency? "I must find out who did this," he snarled. Dr. Whittaker gave a nod, but before he could continue, the intensive care unit's loud alarm went off. Judy's body shook, and she covered her mouth. He felt as if his soul were being ripped from his body as my mouth flew by in shock. Before he could go inside, 2 security officers grabbed him and held him back after he screamed and pushed past the doctor. He watched utter mayhem as nurses rushed around Yandy's bed, physicians yelling instructions, machines beeping madly, and one of the monitors flashing, but it was too late as the doors slammed shut in his face. He was holding the window flashing, his knees buckle. No, Yan did engage in combat. Judy sobbed as she collapsed to her knees beside him. "Lord, please." The doctor killed the air by grabbing paddles. Nothing happened despite Yandy's body jerking fiercely. Kill thought his heart had stopped beating. One more shock, but nothing occurred. His face was wet with tears. "Baby, don't do this. Don't let me try again." As just fell into his palms, his entire body shook. Dr. Whittaker rushed out, perspiration dripping down his brow. He declared, "She's back, yet she's still in the woods," and Menny sees white on his face while breathing correctly. "I must visit her." The doctor took a moment to think before nodding, but then he hurried into the room. Yandy appeared so tiny and weak, and the sound of the ventilator filled the silent room. Leaning near, he said, "Frail, is this to you? Show me a sign." The cardiac monitor beeped steadily, but there was no movement or reaction. "I screamed at you, Dandy," he said, swallowing hard. "They will repent the day they were born after I yelled this out loud." Her eyelids flickered and her finger twitched. "Baby, I'm right here." I was devastated by his voice. "I was so terrified of you." Death appeared to descend upon his entire universe when he noticed Samantha Wallace standing in the doorway of the hospital. His fists tightened so fiercely that his knuckles briefly turned white, and his breath seized in his throat. She wasn't staring at him. Instead, she was staring past him at some of them in the doorway, which made him wonder whether he was dreaming or if fatigue was playing tricks on his mind. She was actually standing in the doorway. As if she had been anticipating this. He spoke in an angry, incredulous voice. With her heels clicking on the tile floor, Samantha took a step closer. She then turned to face Yandy, who was unconscious in the hospital bed, and smirked slowly and deliberately before tilting her head and saying, "I heard about what happened." He felt something if she made it. He snapped at that tone, that attitude, that complete lack of concern for Yandy's recent ordeal. He felt sick to his stomach because it seemed like she knew something he didn't. His voice was dangerously low if she managed to make it. "What on earth is that meant to mean?" Samantha chuckled dryly, and all I could do was caution her about what she had taken. He had balled hands that were clenched into fists. Samantha fixed Yandy's frail fists with her gaze. She warned her that being with you would eventually make her mind's body go rigid as she stepped closer. Samantha was implying that he could sense it in his stomach, not just taste. "You find this amusing," he said, his voice quivering with rage. "You're standing here pretending like you knew this was going to happen." But Samantha smirked, which is what I didn't see. "I just made sure that there wasn't any stillness that gave the impression that the walls of the hospital room were closing in." Then MC lunged, and he would have lost it if the nurse hadn't come in at that exact moment. His body was trembling with anger, and he was heated, but he forced himself to stop since it wasn't yet the perfect time. Samantha didn't recoil or even attempt to hide the fact that his voice was ice. She said, "I didn't touch her," with ease. "It was painful when you played with fire," since M's jaw smoothly. "And so much. Leave immediately." Samantha simply smiled and walked away, as if she hadn't just placed a nuclear bomb in his face as he roared. His entire body tensed. He turned to face the doctor and performed those tests. "I have to find out what's in her system now." Mendeecees' mother took his arm, her fingers shaking as the doctor nodded and rushed away. What was she trying to say? His biggest nightmare was confirmed by the toxicological report. They had poisoned Yandy. Her blood had been determined to contain a unique, slow-acting toxin that, if left untreated, would gradually weaken her and eventually cause her organs to shut down piece by piece. The fact that the poison was discovered in the meal she had consumed the night before she passed out was the most horrific aspect. As Mendeecees read the report, his heart raced. As they reported, he relived the night in his thoughts, which came from a trustworthy source. Yandy's blood ran cold before the food arrived, and he heard a name he never would have thought he would have to suspect: Camilla. With a voice as sharp as a sword, he called her right away and said, "We need to talk." With a pause, Camilla said, "What's wrong? You sound." When they were facing each other, was that incorrect? Young sound. Like a hawk contaminating its prey, Mendeecees smashed the toxicology report onto the table and observed Camilla's reaction. She responded, "I don't ally to me," as her face turned pale. "I swear I had nothing to do with," Camilla taking a step back and speaking shakily. "Why was your name on the report?" Mendeecees said, her eyes darkening. When Camilla heard the report, her breath caught, and she turned away. "Don't play with me, Caught," she said, assisting Yandy. "I didn't mean to offend Kim. I only wanted her to reimburse Mindy." She felt sick to her stomach, but why was she behaving jealously? "You were meant to be her best friend," Revenge Mendeecees said, clenching his fists. "Camilla betrayed me first," but her voice broke. Mendeecees heaved his chest and shook his head. "Who lives and who dies is not up to you." Camilla took a deep breath. "All I wanted was for her to suffer. I didn't anticipate things getting this terrible." Mendeecees clenched his jaw and let out a harsh sigh. It's too late. The police were outside when she attempted to escape. 2 officers stopped her as she grabbed for the door. Mendeecees cuffed her without saying a word. She turned to face Manny. "I apologized to him. She was recently discovered at the hospital again." Southeast's face remained unchanged. As Mendeecees walked in, Yandy opened her eyes slowly and appeared alive but frail and sickly. He sat beside her and softly took her hand as her voice was hardly heard. He said, "It's over, baby," but why did he see her side, rubbing his fingers over her knuckles? The knuckles were filled with a thick quiet. She gave his companion a squeeze. A thick quiet. He's being saved. He knew in his heart that this was not yet over, yet his jaw was still clenched. Was there more to the story than everyone knew, or was this the end of it? What do you think? Was there someone else working behind the scenes, or was Camilla acting alone? Please leave a comment below with your ideas, and be sure to like if you want more amazing drama. This is only the beginning, I assure you. Share your IB slide and SS it. Watch out for the next unexpected turn. Beginning to move at this moment.